G'day guys, JB here, an NBA wrap. Over the last week, we've had a lot going on. I'll give a brief look over how everyone as a team has performed for the last week. I'll have a look over some of the injuries in the league and the implications that has on some key awards. I'll have a look at the passing of the late great Elgin Baylor and touch on a video I made and a thread I made about him. And we'll also look at the trade deadline and the results of teams. So we'll get into the fixture first. Obviously, this one is between the 18th and 25th around the league. Most teams having played 3 to 4 games, one team having played 5 games. But your winning records on the week, your undefeated records on that week are the Clippers, the Bucks and Philly, both going 3-0 and continuing to prove why they are potential top 3 teams in their respective conferences. Big questions out of there are, Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. They're going to have to gel heading into the playoffs. They're going to have to continue to provide that consistent play that they have all year on both ends of the floor. And I think the question at the moment is going to be, can Kawhi sneak into that genuine MVP conversation? I know for a lot of hoops heads, he has been in that conversation this year. Paul George has also been up there as well, but with prevailing injuries across both conferences and the need to finish top 3 and potentially play 60 games, if Kawhi or Paul George can do that, I think they're a genuine chance. For the Bucks and the Sixers, same thing again. I think Giannis has got a chance of really sneaking in. Voter fatigue is going to hurt him, but a genuine chance to sneak a third MVP with everything going on. And for Philadelphia, Tobias Harris, Shake Milton and the like continue to provide the goods without Joel Embiid or Ben Simmons really producing. Joel Embiid obviously out through injury, and they're going to look to have him back in the next 10 days. But Ben Simmons not really producing to how we thought he would. But Philadelphia continuing to roll on, which is a positive side as well. We then have our 3-1 records in the Pacers, the Grizzlies, the Knicks, the Kings, and the Jazz. I wouldn't weigh too much into your Sacramentos and their performance there. They're a side that's not really going to make the playoffs. And they're one of the most inconsistent teams in the league and have been for the last few years. It can be a tale of quarter-by-quarter action in defining how they play. For Utah, still sitting top of the West, and I think prevailing factors, they're going to be a genuine chance of staying certainly within that top 2, but certainly top of the West for the year. For the Knicks, they're in that jungle. Same with the Pacers, they're in that jungle of 5 to 10 consistently there in the East, and that's just going to be a dogfight heading in to the end of the season. But the Knicks, a genuine playoff chance. Randall, a genuine All-NBA chance. And they're really ticking over. Again, for the Pacers, they need to find their form. They need to continue to deliver because at the end of the day, if they don't find form, they don't deliver, then there's going to be a concern for them. Again, stuck in that 5 to 10, I thought they could really push towards that 5th seed starting the season. And again, I just feel they need to play through Domantas Sabonis. You've got Brogdon and LeVert. Recent announcement too of TJ Warren. He's going to be out for the rest of the season. Everyone knows the work he did in the bubble. So there's a lot of work to be done there. And the Grizzlies proving why if you can get a side based around Ja Morant, they're without Jaren Jackson as well, but they're just proving that they really can compete out there in the West. And look for Ja Morant. Once he gets out of this sophomore slump, he's had that rolled ankle at the start of the season, so he's not going to be 100% all year, obviously. But once Ja Morant gets out of this sophomore slump, and once they can really get a side around him, they're going to be trouble. Our 3-2 victors on the week, your Mavs and Pelicans squads. Again, the Mavs going to continue to push towards the playoffs. Again, Doncic, an outside MVP chance if they make that top 3. But it's all about consistency with the Mavs at the end of the day. They're just not a side that can, really take the next step. And ultimately that comes down, in my opinion, to your Porzingises and to your Hardaway Juniors. They're just 2 inconsistent guys who, they might put a game together once a week or once every 2 weeks. But when you're a second option and you want to be a genuine championship contender, you need your second option firing at a second option level and occasionally a first option level to the likes of a CJ McCollum, to the likes of what a Klay Thompson has done. LeBron and AD, they chip that around. Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, they chip that around. But you need to be having your second option perform consistently at that level if you want to be a genuine contender. No side in league history on the offensive end, outside really of the 98 Bulls, has really had a team where their second option has been so inconsistent and a liability offensively. For the Pelicans, again, it's just going to be a matter of who, what, when, and where as far as Ingram and Williamson, both capable players. I just don't know whether you can have Zion with such a limited skill set lead you without an Ingram and vice versa. I don't think you can have Ingram lead you without having that powerhouse inside like a Zion. But, I mean, there's plenty to like there in New Orleans. So, I mean, there's no reason why they can't continue to push. Phoenix, the only team to play 5 games over that time period, 3-2, and they're continuing to be a top 3 seed in the West. Again, I think Devin Booker is an outside chance at an MVP nod, considering Phoenix are not where Phoenix and Utah are 2 teams that are where they shouldn't be by a lot of people's assumptions. So I don't see why we can't be seeing Devin Booker in that genuine conversation. Him and Bradley Beal are certainly going to dominate the headlines as far as all NBA shooting guard selections. They're 1 and 2 for me. Where you put them, I don't know. But again, 5 games for the Suns in that 7-8 day span. 3-2 record, pretty impressive, and continuing to push as far as they can. Atlanta 2-2, Brooklyn 2-2, Charlotte 2-2. Got a lot of teams on 2-2. Cleveland 2-2, Denver 2-2, the Thunder 2-2, Portland 2-2. Again, a lot of those teams there. You've got your Hawks, you've got your Hornets, and they're in that real jungle of being in that 5 to 10. Charlotte, pushing towards that 4th seed. Big questions around them without a LaMelo Ball. We'll see what happens there. But Gordon Hayward doing his thing. Atlanta found out against the Clippers, and ultimately the big test there for them is, their losing streak was snapped, but snapped to a quality playoff team who brought their bench in to, erase that deficit. So the real concern there is heart determination and just whether Trae Young can be the leader of that team. I don't see it happening. Again, his play style isn't conducive to playoff success. Look at how he plays. Look at how James Harden plays. Very similar. Look at the playoff success for Harden. Need I say any more? Cleveland 2-2. They're just having a little bit of a resurgence there. Andre Drummond still no result there. He's going to need to be bought out by Cleveland and moved on. Something the Spurs have done with LaMarcus Aldridge. But the Cavs, they've got 2 nice young guards in Garland and Sexton. They've got plenty of athletic players around them. It's a matter of whether they can build. Denver, they've just made a very decent acquirement. 2 decent acquirements there in free agency. We'll get to that very shortly. But again, another side that, is in that jungle of 5 to 10 out there in the West. And if they can be a top 3 team, I have no problem with saying Nikola Jokic will be the MVP. I just don't believe anyone that's such a liability defensively can win it. I was against Harden winning it the year he did. But again, when your overall offense is generating wins, albeit with offensive deficiencies, you tend to see guys nearly win the MVP. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander being out for a little bit there hurt the Thunder, but 2-2 for the team I projected to be one of the 3 worst in the league. They've got plenty of pieces around them. They fielded the youngest team to ever win the youngest starting lineup to ever win a game during this period as well. Lou Dort's doing his thing. But yeah, really consistent play there from the Thunder under their circumstances. And Portland, they're trying to do a bit as well. They just got rid of Gary Trent Jr. Again, we'll touch on that as well. But the Blazers, Damian Lillard, again, caught in that 5 to 10. They're going to need to do a bit to continue to push forward. I just don't see where they're going to fit. I mean, Lillard and McCollum are a good combination. Melo off the bench, good. But yeah, it's just one of those teams that, for what they should be, this is a team that's just come out of the conference finals 2 years prior, struggled to make 500 last year, albeit with injuries, and then flopped in the first round. Then you've got Orlando, who just blew their team up. They're 2-3, and we'll touch on them very shortly. Detroit 1-2, Golden State 1-2, Boston 1-3. We'll stay with Detroit and Golden State, though. I mean, they've got Sadiq Bey, they've got Jeremy Grant, they've got a few pieces that they can work with moving forward, but they're in rebuild. Don't look for them to make a real impact on the league for the next 2 years. You'll be able to see some positives coming out, but again, not much there. Golden State really just need to do something. They should have tried to really get a piece around your Steph Curry here. Andrew Wiggins does try and do a little bit here or there, but he's not as consistent as he needs to be. Kelly Oubre Jr. coming out with a comment this week of GOAT status and the softness of the league. Yeah, that's all well and good, but you've got to produce wins. The Warriors barely staying at 500. Steph, the reason they're even close to 500 when he's on there winning games. Death taxes operation there. Then we look at our final few teams here. 1 and 3 for Boston, Chicago, Houston, the Lakers, Minnesota, San Antonio, Toronto, and Washington. Some injuries there, some trades there. that we'll touch on in a second. Boston really underperforming, but for my mark, as I said, a team that's made the conference finals 3 of the last 4 years, you need to start delivering, and there should be no excuses. I've seen a few people cop some flack for criticising Boston. I don't think it's unfair. Your expectations at this point is you need to take the next step. Your roster had barely changed before the trade period ended, and really haven't done much there. No offence to Tatum and Brown. Jason Brown, Jaylen Brown started well. Jason Tatum, he's working how he does. I don't think we'll see Tatum change his game much more. Jaylen Brown, not to the level he was at. Kemba Walker not doing his thing. Again, just a side that's really underperforming and really needs to take the next step. Chicago 1-3 again, and Boston, Chicago, they're all stuck in that and Toronto for that fact, all stuck in that 5-10 area. But Chicago just acquired a big piece that we'll get to shortly. Capable scorer in Levine, they just had to really get some more solid pieces rather than relying on young guys who for lack of a better term, just haven't developed. They're going to be role players for their careers, not going to be starters. That's just a fact. Houston, they've just blown it up even further. But Christian Wood getting back into some minutes, but Houston really aren't looking to do much more. The Lakers, big injury news for them. We'll get to them. Were apparently going to try and make a big move there at the trade deadline. Didn't happen, but big injury concerns for them. Minnesota potentially got the Rookie of the Year sitting with them now, again, due to injuries with LaMelo Ball. Again, we'll get to that. But yeah, just some key pieces there for Minnesota. I mean, they have pieces there. They just need to start delivering. And I think they're a side that's going to try and hit for the draft, but that's not really going to work when there's a projected up to 34 picks for Oklahoma City over the next 7 years. I mean, what's that? 7, 14, 20. That's at least 5 quality draft picks per draft over the next 7 years. The Thunder have a lot of good reasoning pieces around them currently on the roster as far as guys who are developing into good trade pieces and solid pieces for other teams. They also have solid draft picks for what is expected to be some decent drafts coming forward. Then you have the Spurs, who, again, are still sitting in that playoff contention, stuck in that 5-10 rut, as always, at the moment. But, again, they're just a matter of consistency. LaMarcus Aldridge has now been bought out. We'll get to that in a bit. But I'm not really sure what they're going to be doing. There was rumours of DeMar DeRozan going. I really don't see why a Spurs side with no veteran experience outside of Patty Mills and Marco Bellinelli, we're going to get rid of a perennial All-NBA contender as far as a shooting guard is concerned. And I think DeRozan is probably a chance to make that third shooting guard spot this year, such has his level of play been for the Spurs. And again, they're just going to need to get some consistency, and it's that consistency that ultimately will decide whether they're a playoff team or not. Toronto, they've just had a bit of a fire sale on their best scorer this year for me, and they've got some concerns as far as stars performing to their contracts and stars that want to get paid once they're a free agent. And Washington, what can I say? Expected them to underperform. They are. They have arguably the All-NBA first-team two-guard and a guy who averaged a triple-double in 3 of the last 4 seasons, not including this one, and he's close to doing it again this season. And the Heat 0-3, they're in a slump, but I don't think they're too worried considering the effort they have just put forward in the trade period. Now we move on to the injuries and the concerns, and ultimately the big concerns at the moment come from the Lakers and come from the Hornets. The Rookie of the Year, LaMelo Ball, and perennial MVP candidate, All-NBA player, LeBron James, going out to injury. LaMelo expected out for at least 4 to 6 weeks, potential of coming back at the back end of the season. But they're also considering him out. Now that does open up the Rookie of the Year argument. You've got Halliburton, you've got Quickly, you've got Sadiq Bey, and you've got Anthony Edwards there. The next guy's there. I think ultimately the big thing that rides with LaMelo at the moment will be the success of the Hornets without him. And I think the fact that he played all year as a genuine starting point guard as a rookie, and the fact that he, in my opinion, won more games for his side than any other rookie has won for their side. The big thing with Edwards is going to be recency bias, and the fact that he is a human highlight at the moment as one of the best dunk packages for a rookie since a Blake Griffin. I don't think that's neither here nor there, but it certainly does help for people who just catch highlights. They're going to be seeing them do that. But I think a shout out to Emmanuel Quickly, particularly in New York. He's really gelling into that team, and he's been a key cog in their success. Sadiq Bey, as I mentioned, one of the up-and-comers going through for the Pistons. And again, it's very hard for a team like the Pistons to really try and find some success for the simple fact that they are stuck in the rut that they are, and the fact they're not going to do much for a couple of years. But at the same time, we're also looking at the fact that he's still playing well. He's still an elite level player, and it is a rookie class. You've got to weigh the rookie class on its own merits. Then you've got Halliburton over in Sacramento, who's really trying to do his thing as well, and he's been complimenting Buddy Hield and De'Aaron Fox really nicely. Almost better, in my opinion, than the likes of Harrison Barnes. Again, the issue is he's on Sacramento, one of the most inconsistent teams in the league. But we're talking about a guy who's close to, over 48% from the field, 13 points a game on that side. He's only started 7 games, but he's an efficient three-point shooter, 2 of 5 from the field at 42%. He's really good. I mean, I don't think people realise that making 40% the league now is, it was absolutely outstanding in previous generations, but the way the ball is shot now, if you're a high-volume three-point shooter, that's what your expectations are. Again, it's my biggest criticism of James Harden, that he's not a 50, 40, 90 shooter. But he's got stroke from the foul line as well when he does get there. So, capable player. Again, the fact he's stuck in Sacramento is going to be the big issue. Sadiq Bey, the big issue with him is that he's stuck in Detroit. And the fact that Detroit's a bottom 3 team, the fact that Sacramento's so inconsistent and a small market is really going to put him on the back burner. You're going to have your Quickleys and your Edwards fight that out, I think, if LaMelo isn't available. But the big issue surrounding LeBron James for me, and the big issue that surrounds everyone else, is the fact that in a 72-game season, for you to qualify for any award, whether that's the MVP, the Rookie of the Year, the Defensive Player of the Year, is the fact that if you're going to play, if it's a 72-game season, you're going to play 60 games. No one's going to look at someone that doesn't play 60 games to win an award. The only guy to win an MVP and not play 50 games was Karl Malone, and that's because the season was 50 games long. I'm just going to have a quick double check over that so people can have a look. As far as games played, in an 82-game season, no player has ever played less than Bill Russell, who played 69 games in an 82 games in an 80-plus game season. Bob Cousy, who played 64. Bill Walton played 58, and that was a miracle because the Blazers went 48-10 in those 58 games. But Karl Malone is the only player with less than 50 games to have won an MVP, and he did that in a 50-game lockout season. In your lockout seasons of 12 and 20, 63 and 62 games respectively, but in all other full seasons, players have had to play at least 64 games to win it. Only 2 guys haven't played 70 games, and that was the 57 and 58 MVPs respectively. Everyone else has played at least 70 games in an 82-game season or around about 80-game season. If you're in a 70-game season, then you've got to be playing 60 games. The big issue there is, will guys be able to get those games up? Now, based on research I did that was accurate, now I do preface this, accurate to the 21st of March, the end of the 21st of March. There are only, at the time of those fixtures, based on the fact that you're going to have to play 60 games, your team's going to be a top 3 seed, there were very few players that were going to be available to win the MVP award. Now, Joel Embiid is done, in my opinion. He's got a lot of work he's going to have to do. Your top 3 teams at the moment, and this is as of today, are Utah, Phoenix, and the Clippers in the East, and Brooklyn, Milwaukee, and Philadelphia, in the West. And in the East, you've got Philadelphia, Milwaukee, and Brooklyn. Now, I'm not saying that none of those guys can or can't make it, but as of the 21st, Joel Embiid needed to play every remaining game. So I would say he's done and dusted. So that's the only contender at Philadelphia. Over in Brooklyn, you've got James Harden and Kyrie, but I cannot put James Harden in the conversation in a season where he forced a trade. Your value as someone who forces a trade is minimal at best, in my opinion. Your next option is Kyrie. He needed to play every game. That's not going to happen. Donovan Mitchell required, at that time, 21 of 31 remaining games, and I think he can still do it. Giannis required 20 of 31 games. He can still do it. LeBron requiring 19 of 29 at the time of publishing. However, they are no longer a top 3 seed. They could do it, but LeBron expected out 4 to 6 weeks on top of where he already is, which is a big issue concern. I don't see him being a contender. And your other options here are a Devin Booker, who at the time of publishing needed 23 or 31, something I think that is capable. Now, on the update, so people are aware at the time of this video, this is prior to the Clippers game. This is going to be published before the end of action on the 25th of the 3rd. The Clippers, through 72 games, 29-16, that's 45. So that means that if you've played 45 games and you're going to 72, 27 games remaining. Now, your MVP candidates with 27 games remaining are Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, meaning that Kawhi needs to play at least 23 of 27 remaining games, and Paul George needs to play 26 of 27 remaining games in order to win the MVP award. So realistically, again, your Rookie of the Year issue is the fact that they've all got to play, and your award issue is the fact that they've all got to play at least 60 games. Your front runner at the moment for your MVP award to me would be Giannis Antetokounmpo, and unless LaMelo picks up, and based on the way that everyone is marketed, Anthony Edwards is your leading Rookie of the Year candidate. I don't like it, but that's just how they base it. But particularly with the MVP award, you've got to be a top 3 team, and your winner at this point is going to have to play 60 games. Giannis is on that path, there's no doubt about it. His numbers are there. They're a top 3 seed. There's really not much more to it than the way people vote it. Do I agree with it? No. I think Joel Embiid has been the most valuable player this year. Do I agree with Edwards as Rookie of the Year? No. I think LaMelo has been more valuable to the Hornets and a key catalyst in comparison to Edwards, who's playing on a team that's trying to tank and has proven to be the most consistent all-year Rookie of the Year. However, when you factor everything in, particularly in the MVP argument, you have to have a success. You have to be proving to provide success for your team. The team's success has to be above and beyond expectation or be at an expectation, i.e. the MVP awarded top 3 team. You have to be putting numbers up. To me, Giannis, and at this point, depending on how LaMelo goes, Anthony Edwards are your MVP contenders. Joel Embiid, done as an MVP contender for me. Nothing against him, hasn't played enough games. Kyrie Irving, done. James Harden, not eligible. Donovan Mitchell, not getting the respect simply because he plays in Utah. Devin Booker. Yeah, well, Chris Paul's turned up. I don't agree with it, but that's how they're going to look. And LeBron, he's going to need to play, at that point, 19 or 29 games. And if we just have a quick look at the Lakers at the moment, which is just not something you really want to be staring at the moment. The Lakers are 28-16, so they've played 44 games. And I think the big question at the moment is LeBron going to be able to play in enough games over the next 28? Who knows? It's a lot of questions to be asked. But at the moment, I think Giannis is going to get it. And it all does come down to the fact that we're in a situation where you've got to be a top 3 team and you've got to play 60 games. Well, I think Giannis can tick that box. And it's that simple. I don't agree with it, but that's how voters are going to look at it. That's how voting's gone in the past. You've got to play games. You've got to be a top seed. And unless you put some phenomenal statistics up, that's just not going to happen. Now, again, I think your outside chances of closing in on that are your Miamis, particularly now with their acquisition. We'll go into free agency very shortly. I think Denver can keep pushing. And again, they're a team that's going to keep pushing. And Djokovic. Jeez, what am I doing there? Nikola Jokic, not Novak Djokovic. Oh, jeez, apologies on that one. But they're your guys. At the moment, I think Jokic is the only guy that's going to potentially come out of the West if they can sneak a top 3 seed, mainly because of voter fatigue with Paul George. And by voter fatigue, I mean they've seen what he's done. Voter fatigue with Kawhi, just for what he's done previously in the past. It's a real thing. It's the only thing, honestly, that's going to hold Giannis back. It's one of the most open MVP races and award races in league history, and it's all come down to injury. So we'll see what happens there. That's my take and opinion on that. But finally, we will get into what has been an interesting trade deadline as we keep going through everything here. Wanting to get a more followed up look at everything at the moment. I'm using Sports Illustrated as our follow through as we keep looking at the way everything is playing. Now, some of our key moves so far, and I'm not afraid to go into them. We'll use Wodge on Twitter. I was using a Sports Illustrated article, but this is straight from Wodge's Twitter. And we will see what we can get out of this. So this is before the end of play, obviously on the 25th of March. which is the trade deadline. But Woj has been on top of everything. So let's get to him and see what he's been able to produce. So we'll go right to the end because he's had a lot of work put in. Always on top of it. We'll then go to Shams. They have been the leading contenders as far as newsbreakers. So as we continue going through, the Rockets were in talks with Victor Oladipo as far as moving him. That's where a lot of this conjecture started. We then moved into the fact Detroit were trading Delon Wright to the Kings for Corey Joseph and 2 second-round picks. The Kings then sent a 2021 via second-round pick via the Lakers of their own 2024 second-rounder, the Pistons in the deal. We then followed through with Denver acquiring JaVale McGee for Isaiah Hartenstein and 2 future protected second-round picks. Cleveland were acquiring a 2027 unprotected second-round pick and the 2023 protected second-round pick through number 46. Orlando then continued to listen to offers for Nikola Vucevic and said it would take a substantial package to pry him away. As we all know, that didn't happen. Orlando got rid of Vucevic and Al-Farouq Amino to Chicago for Wendell Carter Jr. and Otto Porter. Yes, your all-star, 20 and 10 big man, the walking double-double, the most underrated big man in the league, went to Chicago to join up with Zach LaVine, another perennial All-NBA shooting guard option, for Wendell Carter Jr. and Otto Porter. Not much. In summary, Nikola Vucevic and Al-Farouq Amino for Otto Porter, Wendell Carter Jr., and 2 first-round picks. They were in the hunt at that point for Lonzo Ball, but he did not move. Boston then acquired Evan Fournier from outside of Orlando. Essentially, for trying to build around Aaron Gordon at this point, who wanted to trade, Jonathan Isaac and Markelle Fultz, who were under long-term contracts. They got rid of Fournier, their probably most reliable second option in the starting lineup. Terrence Ross obviously being the second most overall. Got rid of Evan Fournier, essentially for draft picks. And then Orlando blew up their team and sent Aaron Gordon to Denver. Aaron Gordon went to Denver for Gary Harris, essentially. So, overall, Gary Harris Jr., RJ Hampton, and a first-round pick for Aaron Gordon. Orlando blew up a potential playoff team in an instant, leaving Terrence Ross by himself. Now, I've got nothing wrong with Jonathan Isaac. I think Jonathan Isaac is an all-defensive, all-NBA, potential All-NBA Defensive Player of the Year level talent. Markelle Fultz has shown spots. But when you trade away 3 of your 4 best players, Terrence Ross probably being their second best player, I think, at this point, particularly with Isaac injured, because Aaron Gordon was saltier than the prerequisite of a tequila slammer. Nikola Vucevic has been a pillar of your franchise, and Evan Fournier, a nice pinch hitter, for not much. There's a lot of questions to be asked. Orlando really blowing things up there. And that changed theirs. Sacramento then sent Nemanja Bjelica to the Heat. And Miami in exchange got rid of Harkless and Silva. Philadelphia then acquired George Hill, Tony Bradley, and Terrence Ferguson and 2 second-round picks, with Austin Rivers going to OKC as part of a 3-way deal. You then had the man for my money, who's been the best player for Toronto all year, Norman Powell, who raised his stocks, traded to Portland for Gary Trent Jr. and Rodney Hood. So Portland now running with Norman Powell, CJ McCollum, and Damian Lillard. Not a bad starting lineup. Don't rate it defensively, but not bad. And a key factor, particularly when you look at the fact that of the 64 players in the NBA to have attempted 200 threes this season, Norman Powell currently sits 3rd in three-point percentage. One of the best shooters in the league. And he's just walked up to Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum, essentially. Because it's not like Gary Trent Jr. has performed where he needed to be, and Rodney Hood has been little to nowhere. Massive acquisition Now, as we keep going with the Knicks, Terrence Ferguson to New York. The Knicks sent Brad Deakus to Philly on a three-way deal. And the Sixers and a second-round pick to the Thunder. Oklahoma City, as I mentioned, now with 34 draft picks over the next 7 years, essentially 5 in every draft. Toronto then traded Matt Thomas to Utah for second-round picks. That deal opened up the roster spot, taking on an additional player in a potential Lowry trade. Raptors continuing to talk on deals within 45 minutes of the deadline. The Hawks and Clippers then were in discussions for Rajon Rondo, which saw Rondo go to the Clippers for Lou Williams, meaning Lou Williams is now in Atlanta. The former six-man of the year has left the Clippers. Rondo now playing for the opposition. Rajon Rondo winning a title with the Lakers last year, now looking to do it with the Clippers, which would be phenomenal in of itself. He was massive in their Game 6, the best player in the Game 6 of a championship round. You don't hear that very often, albeit in a blowout. But Lou Williams now in his favourite strip club, getting his favourite wings, and according to Kenny Smith, his favourite thighs and breasts as well, anyway. Lonzo Ball was traded. Not really. Lonzo Ball was kept. New Orleans maintaining him. Magic Johnson calling him the smartest point guard in the league. And it would be very remiss of New Orleans, who willingly bent over and gave everything to the Lakers previously, to not listen to the guy who essentially made them do it. Houston then traded Victor Oladipo. And the big thing about this is the fact that Houston essentially have now gained nothing out of that James Harden trade. So Victor Oladipo off to Miami. Kyle Lowry staying with the Raptors. Boston traded Daniel Tice to Chicago. Mo Wagner went to the Celtics. Marquis Chris to the Spurs. He goes with cash, which saved the Warriors on luxury tax for the injured player. But as you can see there, Oladipo gone. Lowry staying. The big factor there being contract, which was touched on here. Didn't find a package, compelled to trade Lowry, and Lowry has always been fine with completing the season with the Raptors. He can now head to free agency this summer as one of the 4 or 5 best Raptors ever. Marcus Aldridge completing a buyout with the Spurs, looks to be headed to Miami, which will see him teamed up over there with Oladipo and essentially used as that spare big. While Bam Adebayo, I feel they're going to really try and push as a stretch big now. But that's a massive deal for Pat Riley. He depletes the other team in town, or certainly the other team in the state in Orlando, and continues to build a nice solid pairing there. Oladipo and Butler, he gets to complement Bam. That's a good defensive lineup. Marcus Aldridge hasn't played defense for a little while now, but provides some veteran leadership to this team. Pat Riley always knows what he's doing. Probably the smartest GM of modern times, and probably, realistically, a top 3 GM of all time behind you, Jerry West and Red Auerbach. But other than that, there wasn't really much more that went from there. LaMarcus Aldridge for the Spurs was $5.8 million after he decided to give money back. And the other big story as well, the Kings waived Jabari Parker, making an NBA future murky for the former number 2. Again, Jabari Parker, former number 2 pick, potentially looking at his 5th team in 7 seasons. We then move over to Shams to get any further details on that. Shams being the one of 2 big breakers of news here in the league. And there's some more news that obviously Woj hadn't picked up on either, as we continue to look over the top of all of that as well. He touched on JaVale McGee. He touched on Nikola Vucevic. Touched on Evan Fournier. Touched on Aaron Gordon, which is quite interesting. I'm still bemused at the fact that an empty packet of chips was essentially the trade. It was quite funny, and this will come up further as well. George Hill to Oklahoma City, as we mentioned. So, yeah, the Kyle Lowry trade, another big factor weighing in on that as well, was also the fact that Talon Horton Tucker and Tyler Hero were floating around. And I think that's another big credit too that needs to be mentioned with Pat Riley, is the fact that he managed to get everyone for nothing. It's what the good GMs do. As much as people rip on Danny Ainge, he's just trying to do what Pat Riley and that are doing as well. That's just a simple fact. I can't really fault Danny Ainge for doing that. He just doesn't have the same success. Again, JJ Redick off to Dallas. He leaves the Pelicans, which tells me they are certainly buying in on that Lonzo Ball situation. Again, Avery Bradley and Kelly Olynyk for Victor Oladipo. Olynyk is that stretch. He's out there able to bring LaMarcus Aldridge, who's more reliable on that stretch. Avery Bradley beat up. I mean, he's just really worked the room there, Pat Riley. Again, JJ Redick off to Dallas, as mentioned. There's really not much more going on here. TJ Warren out for the year, as we mentioned, with injury. Myers Leonard waived. His career is almost certainly done after his racial comments during a stream. As you can see there, LaMarcus Aldridge gave back $7.25 million of his contract by Spurs. And that's essentially it for the trade deadline. A few shake-ups here or there. Again, you have the fact that Orlando have been gutted, Chicago have been boosted, Denver's been boosted, Boston got another pinch hitter. No real low-lying teams benefiting from any of this, as normal. And that's my number one complaint, the fact that these low-level teams are expected to just send all their great assets. It's the one thing I can't stand Orlando doing, sending these great assets and not trying to build around them. There's a reason there should be parity in the league, and this isn't it. Big acquisition there for the Heat. They continue to bolster, knowing that they can capitalise on injuries and potentially push for a top 3 finish. Denver, same thing. A massive round of trades. So I certainly can't fault that there either. That's essentially been the week. Again, touching on the fact that the late Elgin Baylor passed away, aged 86. The most important Laker in, Laker history. Obviously, many people are going to go, well, he's not the greatest Laker. Well, no, he's not the greatest Laker. He probably doesn't have the greatest impact on the Laker franchise. Well, that's obvious. He's not the greatest player to play for the Lakers. That's great. He probably doesn't have the most, he's probably not the most famous Laker anymore. He probably doesn't have the greatest Laker career. I mean, there's plenty of guys who essentially had better Laker careers. Jerry West, as an overall Laker, from the time he as a player to his time as an executive, was involved in 11 Laker championships. That's as many as Bill Russell with the Celtics. And when you want to look at as famous Lakers, probably the most famous Laker ever now is going to be Kobe Bryant, and that's through modern times and just what he did in the 21st century for that franchise. The greatest player to play for the Lakers, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Probably the best Laker career, you can make a case, is definitely Magic Johnson. 5 championships, 3 league MVPs, 3 finals MVPs. Then you have your pinch hitters and dominant bigs in Wilt and Shaq. Shaq 3 finals MVPs in a run that saw him as arguably the most dominant player in league history. Wilt coming over and helping secure, along with Jerry West, their first championship. But Elgin Baylor saved the Lakers. There are no Lakers without... Now, there is a Los Angeles team, I've got no doubt about that. There is no Lakers branding the way we know it on a global stage without Elgin Baylor. Drafted, paid a substantial amount to come out early, drafted into the league, into a franchise that was about to go bankrupt, takes them to the finals, finishes 3rd in MVP voting, the highest finish along with Kareem for a rookie to not win the award. Vitally important in the Lakers acquiring enough success to go to Los Angeles. Teams up with Jerry West. They have those multiple championship runs that they don't win. He has multiple statistical records, multiple outstanding factors, was the most highlight-driven perimeter player of his era. And honestly, had they had highlights back then, he'd be one of the most highlight-driven players ever. One of 2 players to make 10 All-NBA first teams and not win an MVP award. The only player with multiple double-digit All-NBA selections and all of them be to the first team. The guy was a legend, went on to be a coach, went on to be an executive of the year. Elgin Baylor has his fingerprints all over the league from top to bottom as a player, as a coach, as an executive, a real standard bearer, and a guy who really isn't getting the lauded, the accolades that he really should post-mortem. It's just terrible to say, but it's true. A shout out to Jerry West, who's lost 2 of the most important people, arguably, in his basketball life, in Kobe Bryant and Elgin Baylor in the last 14 months. A shout out to all those old-timers. Father Time is yet to miss a bus stop, and unfortunately it is that generation of players who solidified the league, made the league what it is today, who are now passing us on. I think we really need to start appreciating their greatness. We need to stop sitting here and talking about oh, well, that era was XYZ compared to this era, or XYZ would just walk into that league and average X amount of points. That's not a fact, and they shouldn't be factors. Let's appreciate these guys for what they've done. Elgin Baylor is no doubt a legend. He is a Lakers legend. He is the most important Laker of all time. I wouldn't say the most valuable Laker of all time. I think your Magic Johnsons, I think your Kareems, I think your Kobe's, I think even Jerry West is a player. But there's no doubt about it. Elgin Baylor, the most valuable Laker as far as the importance to the franchise, and coming from an era that is suddenly becoming bygone, and that's something that we really need to pay attention to and appreciate. Anyway, guys, that's been my wrap. Thank you very much for tuning in. Hit like on the Facebook page, JB's NBA. Follow me on Twitter, Justin_G_Bryan. You can find my other YouTube channel, JB's Highlights and Mixtapes, and you're currently on my main channel. Hit up that Elgin Baylor video. You'll see the almost half hour I did on him, more in-depth done as well. Anyway, guys, that's been me. I'm out.